Notice something different on that Innova. No, I don't mean those white wheels, those are aftermarket wheels, but notice how the Innova is sitting lower to the ground, the stance is better. This Innova is running Race Concepts' new suspension setup for the Innova. Now, Race Concepts, they don't need any introduction. They are the guys behind the fastest race cars, the lap record holding race cars, the rally winning cars, and now they are focusing their energies towards the cars you and me drive on the road. This Innova is running their new suspension setup, which not only lowers the car but gives it better braking performance, better handling and better comfort. How does it perform compared to a stock standard Innova? That's what we are here to tell you. Why do we love the Innova? What explains the Innova Crysta's incredible popularity? Well, there is the reliability, the longevity, it's indestructible, it is comfortable, it is so well suited to our conditions. So no matter what Toyota prices the Innova at, it will continue to sell, people will swear by it, it will command a massive resale value in the second-hand market, and it will just keep going and going and going. But nothing in this world is perfect. Now, compared to its rivals, the Crysta, it really has much better handling, much better ride, longevity. It can do long distances with comfort and tirelessly. But it could be better, right? It doesn't really have the handling chops to enthuse the enthusiast. In terms of its ride quality, it has that typical ladder frame effect in terms of you can feel the small little ripples on the road. In terms of the handling, it does feel a little bit floaty. It has a fair bit of body roll, and when you brake hard, there is a significant amount of nosedive. Can it be bettered? Well, that is what we are here to find out. Now, we made a small boo-boo in this story. This Innova was supposed to be stock, but knowing our friends, none of them really leave their cars stock. So this Innova actually is running teen suspension, and we only noticed that when we were doing the braking test. So when you could see the dive, and from the rear, that's when you noticed the green teen dampers. Now the teen dampers, we have experience of it, and it is better than the stock setup. But now this is a really great test to see how much better the Race Concept setup is to the teen setup on this Innova. Now this Innova Crysta, it runs Race Concepts' new suspension setup for the Innova Crysta. The setup includes the damper as well as the springs, and the springs are wider. It all fits in your normal Innova's setup. So anybody can do it, any mechanic can do it. Of course, if you are in Bangalore, Race Concepts will install it for you for free. But anywhere else you can take it to any mechanic and fit it. It's nothing complicated to it. Now, what does the suspension do? First things first, you can adjust the ride height. So you can drop it 10 millimeters lower than the stock or raise it 60 millimeters higher than the stock. Anywhere in between that, depending on what you want it. This car, it is running 10 millimeters lower because Joel likes the stance. Also, when you lower it, the front wheels, there's a slight negative camber. So it looks nicer, and obviously it aids the handling. In terms of the ground clearance, we've gone over some bad patches and it does not touch anywhere. The Innova really has got enough and more suspension travel as well as ride height, so it's not going to touch even if you lower it by 10 millimeters. In terms of ride quality, now Joel says that this suspension is 5 to 10% stiffer than the stock setup. Obviously, if you are going to install suspension from a person who's got motorsport expertise, you expect the ride to be a little firmer, but it is not much firmer. In fact, I think the comfort is as good as the standard stock setup. In fact, the small little pitter patter that you get with the stock setup, that has reduced with this suspension. Now these dampers, they are slightly larger in terms of diameter, so they have got a larger oil capacity, and that means when you drive it for a longer distance, in a normal suspension, the damper oil, it gets hot and it loses a bit of viscosity and then it becomes soft, there is a bit of sag. That does not happen on this setup. So that means you can drive this car non-stop for a longer distance and it won't lose its suspension compliance or the handling ability. The second is the handling, and that is where you find the big difference. Obviously, because the ride height is also dropped a bit, so there's less of the float. You go around a corner, there is less body roll, and that gives you so much more confidence to drive the Innova longer, harder, faster. Joel, yesterday they drove it down from Bangalore to Pune for our test. and he says that on the highway at 120 kilometers per hour, it stays planted, stable, it's confident, inspiring. When you're hitting a bump such as this, for instance, now when you hit it a little bit harder, there is that body motion, and then it moves once, twice, thrice, and then it settles down. Whereas with this, it moves once and it settles. So on a stock setup, when you hit a bump, there is that motion and it takes a while for it to settle down. Whereas with this, you hit it once and then it settles, and that makes it more comfortable. So over longer distances, you don't tire yourself out. The second is in terms of the body roll, because the body roll has been cut down to a fair extent, and that is what is immediately noticeable stock versus this setup. Now, if you like to play around with your cars, this suspension allows you to do a lot of things. The first is you can adjust the ride height in that 70mm band. Second is you can adjust the preload. So suppose you take it to a racetrack. Now, suppose you take I don't think anybody would really take an Innova to a racetrack, but suppose if you did, you can dial in the preload completely, you can get better handling, and you have the click settings, so you can then adjust the suspension to suit you for whether you want better ride quality or better dynamic ability. So you can play around with the suspension, you can tweak it to suit your personal preferences and also the usage pattern. So on a daily basis, say you've got 7 people in the Innova, so you want it to be a little stiffer to take the load, you can do that. Then on the weekend, when it is just you or a friend going out for a drive, you can then adjust it for better dynamic ability. So this suspension allows you to play around with the dynamic ability of the Innova. Now, the noticeable improvement on the Innova with this race concept suspension is the dive under braking. So first we'll show you how much dive you have with the standard Innova, and then on this modified Innova. So here is how the Innova actually behaves under braking and the dive under braking. And finally, how much will this cost you? Now, Race Concepts will sell you the entire kit for 95,000, and if you're in Bangalore, they will install it for free. If you're anywhere else, they will ship it to you and you can get it installed by any mechanic. It's just a simple bolt-on exercise, won't take too much time. So 95,000, and when you compare it with, say, the suspension that you would have to replace after 1 lakh kilometers on your Innova, the stock OE setup would cost you 65,000. So actually for 30,000 more, you get suspension that works much better. Handling is better, braking is better, comfort is better. Your passengers, they feel more comfortable in the car. There is less of that tossing around, so they don't feel sick. There is less dive under braking. So overall, the setup is actually very, very good. You can dial it in for enthusiasm when you want it. You can adjust it for comfort when you want it. So overall, I think it is a great package, and all of it is done in-house here in India. So some of the components are imported, but everything is assembled, tested, developed here in India. Indian suspension for Indian conditions for the MPV that India loves. My verdict, it is excellent. Definitely something that you should explore.
Subscribe to the Evo India channel and hit the bell icon to keep pace with the thrill of driving.